Okay, our next point is his existence proven? And you're probably wondering if there's not enough evidence to prove to someone that God exists, if they don't want to believe, then why are we trying to prove that he exists? Good question. And to that, I'll say that this is not for them. If you don't want to believe in God, there's not going to be enough evidence to convince you that he exists. But what we're doing here is for the people that, like it talks about in this book, we're trying to convince genuine seekers of God, that is, people whose faith has been obscured by some difficulty and who say, I wish to believe in God. Show me that it is reasonable to do so. And that was me. I remember vividly when I was 20 years old. It was a cataclysmic event in my life that just derailed me. I didn't know where to go or what to believe or who to believe in or why I was even living at that point. But books and good Christian people that God placed in my life encouraged me to believe in him. And through their testimony, through gospel music that I would hear played and preaching, those things brought me back to a right relationship with God because I believed in him again. And that's what we're doing right now. I'm just trying to encourage you to believe in God. We're also here to help strengthen the faith of those who already believe. And I know that most of you who are watching the videos already believe in God. But these things, if you don't already know them about God, maybe they'll encourage you to dig deeper into your relationship with him and just strengthen some knowledge that you may have forgotten. Maybe it'll remind you of something that you haven't believed in for a while. Or maybe that things in your life have kind of covered up. Maybe it'll unearth those things and help you to revive that relationship with God. So yeah, we're looking at the proof. We're going to find evidences of God's existence in creation, human nature, and human history. And it talks about it in the book. It's on page 34 is where we are right now. And we're looking at, I'm trying to find the page. It's talking about, here it is, page 36. An elderly woman had a discussion with a younger man who believed in evolution and didn't believe in God, things like that. She asked him, where would you find the answer to the question, what came first, the chicken or the egg? And he tossed it around back and forth, and he would say either the egg or the chicken. And when you get right down to it, there has to be a creator of the first thing. Like if the chicken came first, who created the chicken? Or if the egg came first, who created the egg? And that's where the theory of evolution comes in. Who came up with the first thing that became the next thing? That question is never answered. And the point of those theories is to leave out God. You can't have a first thing without a creator of the first thing. No matter what the first thing is, if it's an atom, okay, where did that atom come from? Oh man, this chapter is so cool in this book. My faith was really encouraged by it. And I pray and read daily, but some books that you find like this one are just really good at solidifying your faith and encouraging you to believe to depths that you didn't think were possible. Things that you never would have thought of by yourself. Other people, their testimonies and their walk with God has brought to life some things. Like take a look at the clock on slide 29. That's the clock in Strasbourg. And you can see how detailed that thing is. Like, there's no way that it just existed, right? Like, that would be like saying, okay, I'm going to throw up this handful of dirt and it's going to be a clock of that design. There's no way. That's what people sound like when they think that the earth and all of its intricate designs just created itself. Like from a cosmic boom or something. How does that happen? How does something so detailed and so well designed come from nothing? There is a mind behind all of this. There is a God that created everything in its perfect design and for a perfect purpose. And if he created the world like that, he created each creature and each thing with its own purpose and design. And he created you in just that way. You have a special purpose distinct from your spouse, distinct from your best friend or your parents. He created you for a purpose. That's amazing. Check out that beetle right beside it on the same slide. See if I can find it in the book. It's called a staghorn beetle. And the one with the horns on the left is the male, and the one on the right is the female. And when they're grubs, like the little worms, they look exactly the same. I mean, there's no way to distinguish the male from the female at that point in its life. But when it's burrowing underground, I guess in its cocoon phase or whatever that phase is called for that particular beetle, the male digs a trench much longer than the female does. Why? Like, how did it know at that point in its life that it needed to dig a place big enough that it would house its entire body and its horns, and not just one long enough for its body, like the female does? Who told it to do that? And you may think that maybe it inherited the instinct from its parents, but who told the first beetle how to do that? Or who designed those snowflakes? Do you think that they all just perfectly look like that when they fall down? The millions and millions of snowflakes that fall every time it snows, and they all look different. Each one of them has 6 points. Some people do nothing but study snowflakes, which blows my mind, but they've found out that each one has 6 points. Why? I don't know. Some people think that it is kind of like God's signature. His Trinity explained in those 6 points, which is really neat to me. But who would come up with those things? Or are you just of the mind that some people believe like it just happened? I don't think anything just happens, especially not like that. Not with the intelligence and design that those things have. There's no way. Check out slide 30. This is another place to find an evidence of God. And men's nature, with its urges and aspirations, point to a personal ruler. There's something inside of you in each person, if you really think about it, that governs you to do right or to do wrong. And I've often thought about this. If you were on an island with no one else, no one to tell you about God, how would you know that God existed? And it talks about that in Romans. Like, no one has to tell you that God exists, because on the inside of you is your conscience. And it tells you of God. It tells you what is right and what is wrong. And where did you come up with that? You didn't come up with what's right and what's wrong. You don't decide that. That comes from God. That knowledge of right and wrong comes from God. And it blows my mind to think that how people just dust off the thought of God. Like you came up with all of that yourself. That blows my mind. And there's this scripture, my soul thirsteth for God. It's in Psalms 42 too. Everyone does. Whether you know what that is or not, your being longs for something and you can't quite put your finger on it. But it's God. And I didn't know that for a long time in my life. I would try to find satiation, I guess, is a good word for what I was doing. In high school, I remember listening to all kinds of music to try to bring some kind of comfort to my life or some kind of feeling of liberty or freedom or just fun, I guess. I don't know, at different stages of your life, you come up with different things to do to bring you some kind of comfort or relief. And that's what I would do. I listened to different kind of music to bring me peace, or I would hang out with different people to make me feel a particular way. Whatever way I wanted to feel, I sought out things to make me feel that way. But feelings are just that. They are so fleeting and it varies every moment. Like you could feel totally in love with someone one moment and the next moment you'll feel nothing. But there's always this longing in your heart for something. I'm going to make it easy on you. That's God. And there's nothing that can bring you the peace and comfort and that can quench that thirst in your soul like Him. Like a personal relationship with someone that truly loves you for you and not, He doesn't love a future version of you. He loves who you are right now. And all of your flaws, they don't bother Him. He just wants to love you. And that's hard for some people to understand. It was hard for me. And it's still hard on some days. But you just keep going. You keep pressing in. And you keep loving Him no matter what the day brings, and no matter what your feelings say, no matter what your flesh says. Because at the end of the day, God is in control, and what He says matters. Not what you feel, not what the government says, not what's going on right now. None of that matters. And just a quiet rest will come from God. And that's everything. That's all you ever need. There's a couple more slides on here talking about God in the evidence of God in human history. And you can, if you read through the history of the Old Testament, or just in history books in general, the history of America, as short as its life has been, you can see how it has been governed by the thought of God. People make decisions based on what they feel is right or wrong. And a lot of those things in history, a lot of those people are God-fearing. Some of them aren't, and that shows. But you can just see the thread of God weaving in and out through human history. Let's see, in the book it says, the history of mankind, the rise and fall of nations like Babylon and Rome show that progress accompanies the use of God-given faculties, and obedience to God's law, and that national decline and decay followed disobedience. And if that doesn't sound like the world in which we live. Slide 32, the evidence of God in universal belief. No matter what country or what race of people you find yourself accompanying, they will have some type of religion. And I know just in my own family, we come from Native Americans, which have their own spiritual belief system. We're French and German and English, and all three have intermingled religious beliefs. But even tribes in Africa or tribes in the jungles, like, they have their own form of spirituality, and all of it leads to knowing that there is a higher being that we are subject to, that this world is subject to, and that is sovereign over all of it. Now, whether or not all of those, all of the characteristics and virtues of their religion are correct, most of them are not. But it still points to that natural thing in all humankind that believes that God exists. It's a well-known fact in us, in our race, like, God exists. And you have to fight against that. And that's what atheism is. It goes against our deepest and most fundamental convictions as a race. And most of the time, most of the people that I've come in contact with that are atheists, you can tell that they are bitter. Like, something has happened in their life to rob them of joy and peace. And they're unhappy, generally. And they may say that they're not, but you can just tell their spirit is not at peace. And it's because something has happened in their life to rob them of that. And when something like that happens, its goal, the enemy's goal, Satan's goal, is to destroy your faith. I don't think Satan cares if you live or die, but if your faith lives or dies, that's what he's concerned with, whether or not you believe in God still. That for atheists, that's something that's happened to them. Their faith has been robbed. And even that most core belief that God exists has been snatched from them. And that's not something that we point our finger and look down upon them for, but it's something that we can pray for them, because Satan has taken that from them. Their joy and their peace and their even most fundamental belief that God exists has been taken from them. Guys, that is all for this week. I'm sorry that it took so long for that to get up. This is the first video that I've done, and I was really nervous about it. And I used to not be, but I don't know, you go through stages in life. But thank y'all for being patient with me and for loving me in spite of my anxieties about public speaking and about doing videos. This will definitely not be the last one that I do, and hopefully this quarantine will, I'm praying that it's going to be better for us than what it was intended to do. I think Satan has intended for it to seclude us and isolate us, but God's people always find a way to thrive in situations like that. In the New Testament, in the book of Acts, it was the dispersion and the persecution of the saints that caused the gospel to spread. And I think that's what's happening again. Maybe we're not being persecuted as Christians, but our whole entire race is being put under attack. And the church is rising. And I love it. I love all the different ways that the church has found to still exist and to still socialize with each other. And I'm praying that we can use this time wisely as our group of people at our church and as a body of Christ as a whole. I'm praying for us. And I pray that your faith will be encouraged through this video or through the PowerPoint. Definitely read this book if you don't have it. The author is Meyer Pearlman, and it's called Knowing the Doctrines of the Bible. It's an awesome book. It will encourage your faith. Highly recommend it. Next week, we will be talking about the attributes of God, and I hope you'll stay tuned. See you then.